believe. So thank you all. There's a lot I know that goes on in the background just to make any event like this possible. So a bow to all of you there at the Buddhist Library just for having me here and bringing us all together, really, because this is a very interesting and tricky time, you know, to be alive and working and living. And that's what we're going to be exploring tonight in this talk. But before we go there, I just want to say a few things about how this will run. The little sketch I have of how things will go is that first we'll just actually settle into some meditation. I'll describe that when we come to it, just to get ourselves established and receptive for, you know, the words I want to offer and share. And then second, I'll actually speak into that meditation. And after I've given that talk, I'd really love to open this up to what we call in Zen koan inquiry. I'll be touching on a number of what we call koans in this talk. And koans are mysterious and vital encounters between often a teacher and a student, or it could be a student and a student, or a teacher and a teacher, or it could be someone living in a hut talking to a passerby. There's no recipe for what can give birth to what we come to call a koan. But every koan is a living Dharma encounter. And I'd like to offer a few of these koans into the talk and then open them up into a shared space so that all of you here gathered can have a chance to respond, to see what this koan might ignite in you, bring forth in you, rouse in you. It's always a very wonderful, exciting, unpredictable exercise to have a koan inquiry. So as Aggie has also said, it's lovely if you can, I'm just going to put myself back on gallery view so I can see you all. If you can make your video or turn your video on, it's a lovely thing, because what I want to establish here is a practice space. This is not a lecture or a seminar or anything like that. We're all gathered together here in a shared room, and there's an intimacy to that. And I think that's always the case with a Zen gathering or a Buddhist gathering. But I do feel that's even more so the case now when we're missing each other. You know, it's hard to be in touch. So if you can possibly share your screen, it's lovely just to see real human faces appearing on the screen. Now, what I'll do is I'll ring the bells in the traditional way, and I can't guarantee the bells are going to sound as good to you as they do to me, because Zoom often has a bit of a struggle with bells. But I'll ring the bells in the traditional way, which is just 3 times, and that just marks the beginning of a round of meditation. And I just invite you to settle into whatever form of meditation you're familiar with or accustomed to, whatever brings you back into your body and into the place that you are. And I'll speak a little bit into that round of meditation to help establish that. And then we'll flow into the talk and pick up this very interesting set of words. I am sick because the whole world is sick, which comes from a remarkable sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, which some of you may already be familiar with. But let's not go any more there now. Let's actually begin a round of meditation and see where it takes us. So as I said at the outset of our gathering, we are here together at a very, very interesting time. There's not just the obvious upheaval of coronavirus and the lockdowns, which I know have been, established right through Sydney especially and spreading through New South Wales. They've certainly been in Victoria for a long time, and especially in Melbourne. We're really almost rounding off our second year of these lockdowns. But there is also this climate of misinformation and confusion, compounded and informed and exacerbated by the very real climate emergency we find ourselves in. And at the start, I think, of the first Melbourne lockdown, somebody made the comment that this pandemic and this lockdown, it's a little bit like Mother Earth has sent us all to our rooms to have a good think about it for a while. And I like this a lot, because instead of maybe having a tantrum about where we are, perhaps we can actually just sit with it for a while, absorb it for a while, see what it's asking of us for a while. There are all these oceanic currents washing through, turning in unexpected ways, reaching right into our lives right now. So let's experience them. And of course, to do this in meditation begins, of course, with the breath. Just to accept each breath. Each breath, as you probably already know, is unrepeatable, a gift, mysterious. We don't even know what a single breath is. When we really sit in meditation and receive each breath, can you really say where one begins and one ends? Or are they just somehow flowing one into the other? Impossible to number, in fact. So feel that breath coming in. Feel it arrive in your body. Right into your body. Right into your legs and your arms, into your toes, your fingers. And feel the warmth of your body. Here we are, these animal creatures, these soft, tender animal creatures. How rarely we actually stop to pay attention to that simple but remarkable fact. Here we are, flesh and blood, breathing, alive, still. And notice how this is expressed with every tiny little sound. It might be the click of the fridge. It might be the call of a bird. It might be the creak of a door or a floorboard. Just as there is no line or no number between one breath and the other, there's no line or number or anything between any one of those little sounds or little sensations and you. So in meditation, we just let everything arrive as it is. Not numbering it, not labeling it, not trying to push it away or control it, not trying to hold on to it and control it, but just to let it pass through as it is and announce our true body, creaturely, real, earthy, just as it is. I don't think there's anything more grounded than sitting on the ground. And I love that Mother Earth has grounded us, sent us to our room, grounded us for a while. Let's not waste this opportunity. Let's be here grounded on the earth together. And to unpack this a little bit, I do want, as I promised, to look at the troubles of the world that we find ourselves in. Let's face it, it's a troubling time. There's no way to skirt that fact. The world is sick. It's plain for anybody whose head is screwed on. They can see that with complete, obvious awareness. But luckily there's, of course, and we shouldn't be surprised, a sutra that takes us right into the heart of this question of what sickness is, what it's like to live in a sick world, what it's like to meet that completely in this life and not recoil, not pretend otherwise. And this sutra, as I said at the outset, is the Vimalakirti Sutra. If you know it, you're lucky. It's a fabulous, wild ride of a sutra. It is so full of humor, imagination, flair, and also the mess and turmoil and richness, the genuine fragrance of this world we find ourselves in. There's no nonsense about this sutra. It brings everything to the fore. All of the gritty dimensions of this life to the fore. And it's particularly cherished in the Zen tradition for that reason. Because it's so playful, so audacious. We just love it. Just like loving life and all of life. And learning to celebrate this kerfuffle we call life. How lucky that this was identified and written down and shared so long ago. We don't actually know when this sutra was written. It's estimated to have appeared around 100, the year 100 of the Common Era, but that's a guess. And no one knows who wrote it. We'd only be guessing there too. But the central figure, the central character of this sutra is the layman, Vimalakirti. And it's important that he is a layman. This is not someone practicing in a monastery. This is not somebody holding themselves one whit back from the world. This is a sutra directed at you and me, at lay practice. At the fact that if the Dharma is so, if the Dharma is completely non-dual, then there can be no separation between the monastery practice and daily practice in the world. The Vimalakirti Sutra really is one of the earliest Mahayana Sutras. The Mahayana, of course, represents a radical turn in the expression of Buddhism, a turn away from what we might call the pursuit of a personal kind of salvation, the dream of ascending to nirvana, a place where there is no old age, sickness, and death. Instead, the Mahayana says, if you want to understand old age, sickness, and death, you must inhabit it completely, realize it completely, and there you will find the great liberation of Dharma in the thick of life itself, not in some other place, but right here. So Vimalakirti is our great figure that represents this turn. And really it is the turn away from again becoming some sort of pure Buddha, and instead embodying what becomes known as the Bodhisattva, the one who rolls up their sleeves and gets involved, the one who admits to the full spectrum of lay life, even the full spectrum of monastery life. They're both riddled with intrigue and conflict and mess. So how is it that we are to discover our liberation in the midst of that? This is what the Bodhisattva turn, the Mahayana turn, is all about. And that's what I want to share with you in this talk tonight. So when we first meet this Vimalakirti, this lay Bodhisattva, we meet him in a remarkable place. We meet him sick in bed. This is the central image of the Vimalakirti Sutra. Not some lofty figure in the sky, but the layman Vimalakirti sick in bed. And Vimalakirti says this, or actually the sutra puts it this way. It says, at that time, the rich man, he was a rich too. He was rich, he had children, he had a wife, he worked, he had servants, he went to all kinds of places in the world, including gambling halls and brothels, all the time doing what he could to share the wisdom of the Dharma in those places. So at that time, the rich man, Vimalakirti, thought to himself, I'm lying here sick in bed. Why does the world-honoured one, that's Shakyamuni Buddha, in his great compassion, fail to show some concern for me? And the Buddha, immediately aware of this thought, said to Shariputra, you must go and visit Vimalakirti and inquire about his illness. This is really like saying, Shariputra, go and find out what illness is. Go and ask Vimalakirti about it. I'd love to see what he says. Now, it's also important to realize here that there's this great, almost psychic connection between Vimalakirti and Shakyamuni Buddha, the world-honoured one. It's a lovely thing. It's difficult to tell at times in the Vimalakirti Sutra whether this is Vimalakirti speaking or the Buddha speaking. Is this one? Is this two? Or are they yet again stepping right through the dualism that we are so accustomed to as human beings? Are they stepping through that dualism to say, can't say one, can't say two? They are so compatible, you cannot tell them apart, finally. But here, Shariputra has been asked by the world-honoured one to go and visit Vimalakirti, but Shariputra doesn't want to go. He's met Vimalakirti before, and Vimalakirti has challenged him in uncomfortable ways about his own practice. So Shariputra holds back and says, no, I'm not ready to go. He gives his reasons to Shakyamuni, but recoils from this invitation to go and ask about Vimalakirti's sickness. So the world-honoured one asks the other 9 great disciples that he has, will you go and visit Vimalakirti? Will you go? Will you go? And each time these disciples give their excuses and hold back. They don't want to go. Why not? Why won't they go and visit a sick man in bed? Well, one way to look at this is to see that, you could look at these disciples as people that are perhaps practicing with a kind of purity that finds it difficult to bear something called old age, sickness, and death. Perhaps they're practicing some form of detachment that is supposed to make them immune from old age, sickness, and death. In fact, we know that this is one of the issues that these disciples have with Vimalakirti, because when they give their excuses, they give all sorts of examples about how Vimalakirti, when they met him in the past, brought with him all of the complexity of the real world, the real human mortal world. And that's tricky. That's a hard thing to take on board, a hard thing to practice with. Or perhaps it's an easy thing to practice with. Let's look a little bit deeper into that. And maybe we'll do that by taking up a little case from a collection of koans that points to what Vimalakirti might be bringing to these 10 disciples and bringing to us when he's lying there in bed. This lying there in bed is a great teaching. But when Vimalakirti had met these disciples in the past, he was always bringing with them, as I said before, the complexity of the real world and the fact that things flow from ease to difficulty, difficulty to ease. Let's have a look at this with this koan I want to share with you. This comes from a lovely collection of koans called The Record of Empty Hall, compiled by a mysterious figure called Zhu Tang, who we'll meet a little bit later on. But here's the case. It actually involves the world-honored one, Shakyamuni. So at this time, an outsider asked the world-honored one, "Yesterday, what kind of Dharma did you express?" And the world-honored one said, "Settled Dharma." The outsider again asked, "Today, what kind of Dharma did you express?" And the world-honored one said, "Unsettled Dharma." The outsider said, "Yesterday settled, today, why unsettled?" The world-honored one said, "Yesterday settled, today unsettled." When I first met this koan, I just laughed. I think we can all recognize ourselves in this yesterday settled, today unsettled. This whole period of lockdown and COVID can feel a bit like that. How innocent yesterday seemed compared to the unsettled nature of today. But isn't every day like this? Every moment like this? In fact, every breath like this? Yesterday settled, today unsettled. Perhaps you can sense that these disciples were hoping for a world that would be settled all the time. But Vimalakirti and the world-honored ones say, it's not like that. It's yesterday settled, today unsettled, and this is the Dharma, through and through. If you do not push away any single thing, then everything is expressing itself only for your benefit. And as a lovely addition to this case, the compiler, Zhu Tang, who I mentioned before, said this. This is his sort of capping phrase for this koan. He just said, caring for each and going. Caring for each and going. Caring for settled Dharma. Caring for unsettled Dharma. Caring for yesterday. Caring for today. Caring for this breath. And now this breath and this breath. Caring for this person that you meet. This person, this person. This being, this being, this being. This is why in the Mahayana, we always celebrate the practice of saving the many beings, caring for each and going. This going is caring in motion. going from one breath into the next breath, into the next breath. It really means always being here, always being available. Which begs the question, who will go to care for Vimalakirti? Who will visit him? Well, after all of these disciples and a whole bunch of others too give their excuses and hold back from caring about Vimalakirti sick in bed, finally Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, and as soon as he agrees to go, he's instantly and magically whisked into Vimalakirti's room, which is only 10 foot by 10 foot, about 2.4 meters by 2.4 meters, perhaps like the room you're sitting in now. It's a very small room. But the news of Manjushri actually going to visit Vimalakirti, that news goes viral. And all of a sudden, there are 32,000 other bodhisattvas and beings who want to join both of them in that room, and they do. They all gather along with Manjushri and Vimalakirti in the 10 foot by 10 foot room, and they all fit comfortably. Not only do they fit perfectly comfortably, they all fit perfectly comfortably on jeweled lion thrones. A nice little detail. Because after all, is not the whole world sitting with you now in your own 10 foot by 10 foot room? And is not each being in its own remarkable way sitting on a jeweled lion throne, a perfect fit for this room that really has no limit, that can actually accommodate all when our mind and heart is open? And then Manjushri asks the question that is on the lips of everyone there, and I'm sure on the lips of everybody here. Vimalakirti, why are you sick? That's when Vimalakirti gives his famous and thunderous response. I am sick because the whole world is sick, he says. And to look at this a little bit deeper, I want to introduce another koan, an incredible koan, one that is inexhaustible in its offering to all of us and our genuine earthly lives. And this is a koan given to us by the great Zen teacher Yunmen from China, Song Dynasty, China. This is how it goes. Yunmen addressed the assembly and said, medicine and sickness heal into each other. Or in some translations, medicine and sickness mutually correspond. He goes on to say the whole world is medicine. Now, what is yourself? So medicine and sickness heal into each other. The whole world is medicine. Now, what is this self? So there's so much to see here. Now, on the obvious level, of course, if there's no sickness, there's no need for medicine. If there's no medicine, there's no need for sickness. They heal into one another, dissolve into one another. They reveal one another. And they are not two. Likewise, what we call nirvana and samsara, these apparent poles, this dualism of nirvana and samsara, they are not two. They heal into each other. As Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Zen teacher, said, enlightenment is suffering. Suffering is enlightenment. And then he just says, full stop. That's it. And there are so many ways to practice this and explore this right now, as we've been touching on right through this talk. How is the sickness we're experiencing as a community or as individuals, including the pandemic, of course, but also the tragedy of our environmental situation right now? How is this sickness likewise medicine? Where is the dissolving point of this sickness into medicine in your own life? We might consider the upheaval of all of these years as a genuine reckoning with how greedy and hateful and ignorant we have been in our relationship to the earth and to each other on this earth. For so long, we've taken the conditions of this life on earth for granted. We've simply extracted, exploited, manipulated, and squandered the richness of this earth. We've behaved as if all of our actions have no consequences, and yet they do. And perhaps this reckoning, the fact that we are finally experiencing some kind of an upheaval, is a wake-up call, a way of peeling our eyes open, a way of forcing us, if you like, to see how dependent we are on one another, how fragile the earth actually is, how fragile our connections are if we do not pay attention to them. So when the mutuality of medicine and sickness is really and genuinely taken to heart, then we can honestly say that the whole world is medicine. Settled, unsettled, easy, difficult, however it appears, it is only for our benefit. And then the trickiest moments of our life, the most vexing moments of our life, and I would say particularly the trickiest and most vexing moments of our life, then they can be received as a great gift. Something important, profoundly important and transformative to work with. After all, it's difficulty that wakes us up. If we didn't have difficulty, we would not realize how genuinely we are here. And of course, all of this must be discovered and experienced personally. This is why Yunmen goes on to say at the end of his short but limitless teisho or teaching, now what is this self? What is yourself? What is your true self? What is your actual body? Not the one that you have invented and made up, often so carefully, like a great curated exhibition of the self. Not that one. What's your real self? That's what he's asking. A little bit closer, let's take up another great koan from the tradition. All of these are inexhaustible, of course, and I'm just touching on them lightly here, just so that you can get a taste and a sense and let them into your bloodstream. But this is another one that features a teacher called Dongshan, another Tang Dynasty Chinese teacher. And Dongshan here, like Vimalakirti, is sick in bed. Very interesting. Another example of this encounter at a bedside. So we're told that Dongshan was unwell, and a monk went up to him and asked, "Your reverence is unwell. Is there someone, after all, who is not sick?" Dongshan said, "There is." The monk said, well, does the unsick person nurse your reverence? Dongshan said, this old monk is properly looking after that one. The monk said, well, how about when your reverence looks after him? Dongshan said, then this old monk does not see that there is any illness at all. Well, we're told here that Dongshan was sick, but in fact, from the record, we know he was very sick. He was approaching death as an old man. So this monk approaching Dongshan in this way is doing so very delicately. He's really saying, you've been the great teacher of this assembly for a long time. You are incredibly seasoned in this practice. You have a lifetime of practice behind you. What does that mean when it comes to experiencing sickness? What does that mean in the light of the Dharma? Is there someone, after all, who is not sick? Who is this monk referring to when he asks about this person who is not sick? Have you met this person? This one without a name, without a shape, without a form? The one that is entirely here right now, but who cannot be finally pinned down? Well, Dongshan says there is. He says there is such a one. And then the monk asks, well, does this unsick person nurse your reverence? This is a very interesting question. It's a bit like asking, does the Dharma look after you? Does a lifetime of practice protect you from getting ill? To which Dongshan, this old, seasoned teacher, gently replies, this old monk is properly looking after that one. So this old, feverish monk is looking after the one with no name. How? How is he doing this? Well, by being completely alive to the sickness itself, stepping right into it with no separation at all. This doesn't make light of sickness in any way. In fact, it's more about admitting it completely, admitting the difficulty, admitting the pain, admitting the discomfort, the headaches, the shakes, the raspy throat. All of this is embodied by Dongshan. But he says by embodying that fully, he is looking after the one that cannot be named, the one who is not sick. And so the monk asks, so what's it like when you do that? What's it like when you look after that one? And that's where Dongshan says, well, then this monk does not see that there is any sickness at all. And whenever we embody our difficulty, whenever we embody our sickness, whenever we embody the world as it is, deeply, thoroughly, especially in our meditation, in our lived meditation, as we walk through this world, can we genuinely say either healthy or sick? Or is it just as it is? Is it discovered just in the nursing itself? I'm suddenly thinking of how the healthcare workers in the hospitals right now, these hospitals that are already at breaking point, were already at breaking point before we'd even heard the word COVID. They are not holding back in the slightest from what is appearing before them day after day after day. They are embodying and meeting the sick world, nursing that one, minute after minute. It's extraordinary. Without knowing it, they are the bodhisattvas of our time. So to be intimately aware of the one who is not sick is to be thoroughly attentive to the needs of the one who is. This is where medicine and sickness heal into each other, revealing our true self, just as it is. So let's go back, return to Vimalakirti's room, back with the 32,000 other beings and bodhisattvas, all seated there on their lion thrones. It's important to remember that in this sutra, Vimalakirti's sickness is never named. He's sick because the whole world is sick, that's all. He is, after all, the whole world. His body knows no limits. He is exactly the whole world. And he's unafraid of that fact. As he says himself, the bodhisattva is like this. For he loves living beings as though they were his children. If living beings are sick, the bodhisattva will be sick. But if living beings are cured, the bodhisattva too will be cured. Settled, unsettled, settled, unsettled. Vimalakirti goes on. You ask what this illness arises from? The illness of the bodhisattva arises from his great compassion. And remember that the word compassion comes from the root compati, which means to suffer with. It's not just a nice thing to do, to be compassionate. It's our ability to suffer with, to join hands with the suffering world. And that is what opens the way. So even though we might be restricted right now in our own 10-foot by 10-foot rooms, sick with concern about the world, or anxiety, or confusion, or loneliness, or grief, we are nevertheless surrounded by 32,000 bodhisattvas and beings, all of whom are taking care of us the moment we take care of them. After all, the Dharma cannot be discovered anywhere else but in this room. It can't be discovered anywhere else but in our wonder at our own mortal flesh and blood bodies. That's the bodhisattva path. That is the Mahayana way to discover our liberation right here in the midst of whatever is happening. And I thought I'd leave you, actually, before we perhaps open this up for some koan inquiry, with a poem by Anna Sphere, which I think just picks up on so many of the threads that we've been looking at together in this talk. And this is her poem. I'll read it to you in full and let it in. It's another one of these beings on a lion throne. She says, this morning, a vast new world is created for me, especially for me. What a luxury. It's the world of suffering. Outside the window, a city of the world of suffering. Here is an authentic street of that city. Here is a table, a plate, a spoon solidly suffering. I will eat my breakfast on it today. Before my house, a car and a driver, both spick and span, just as if real, but this is an appearance. Yesterday, they did not exist. They were made today, especially for me. What a luxury. No effort was spared. Even a fly which sits at the edge of a piece of paper while I write is a new one, a fly of the world of suffering. That world was offered to me so suddenly. It is a precious and rare gift, like a noose of diamonds. I wonder at it. I wonder at it. My hands grow cold out of wonder. Convex eyelids close softly on my eyes. So I hope you can hear in that poem the words as if they were coming from Vimalakirti himself. They are the words coming from the celebration of the difficulty of this world. So, let's now turn the page I'm trying to do towards a little bit of koan inquiry. If you've never encountered koans before, well, you're in for a treat. I've described them briefly before, but working with them or sharing your experience of them is just a marvelous thing. It's a beautiful way to discover the Dharma in yourself, share it with others, and learn together. That's the main thing. We do, after all, wake up together. Most of these koans come in the form of dialogues. Dialogues because if we weren't mixing with each other, we wouldn't be showing the world. We wouldn't have the way turned in unexpected ways. And each koan is a surprise. If it's not a surprise, if it doesn't beguile and flip you upside down somehow, it's not flipping you right way up, flipping you completely into your own life. So when we respond to these koans, it's not about being clever or giving any kind of sort of philosophical or theological answer, not at all. It's about giving a personal response, one from your own experience. They're not tests or challenges, or they're not trying to beat you around in any kind of way. Instead, they're like a stone to trip over and fall down laughing, fall into your life laughing. So it all depends on your willingness to engage. Don't hold back. Don't be like the 10 disciples in Vimalakirti's room who hold back. Instead, jump into each one of these cases. And this is the way I think I'll do it just now, is I'll ring the bell. And that is an opportunity just to, again, settle into silence, settle into your meditation, just taste that silence and your breath again, just briefly. And then I'll say a few words about the koan, introduce the koan, ring the bell again, and then the floor will be open. And I really encourage anyone who's touched by those words in some way just to put your hands in what we call gasho, hands together, palms together, like so. And then I'll just invite you to speak and unmute. And then you can share something. There may be no particular comment offered in response. It may just flow onto somebody else who shares something in response to that koan. And let's just listen to each other. Listen to the lives that come forth in the wake of these koans. It's a special space we have here, a practice space in which we can hear and learn from the real people that we are. So, I'll ring this bell and we'll settle into the silence just briefly, and then I'll introduce the first koan. The first koan, of course, is the topic of tonight. Why are you sick? To which Vimalakirti responds, I am sick because the whole world is sick. Can these words, and how? What do they bring forth? What do they light up? Why are you sick? I am sick because the whole world is sick. What is the nature of this I? What is the nature of sick? What is the nature of whole? With a koan, you can enter from any point. Every single word and every single resonance of every single word is an open gate into the koan and into your life. So why are you sick? I am sick because the whole world is sick. So the floor of the 10-foot by 10-foot room is open. Does anybody have a response they'd like to share? So maybe we've just got a little bit more time. Maybe we'll just touch on another one. That doesn't exclude anybody from responding to that. Well, what has been our central case for this evening. But let's just open one more. I think we've got time for one more. So I'll ring the bell again, and we'll just be silent for a moment, and I'll introduce it, and then bring us back into this shared space. So flowing naturally on from that opening case is the one that was offered to us by Yunmen. A great, inexhaustible case, as I said in the talk. It's the one where he says, medicine and sickness heal into each other, or mutually correspond. The whole world is medicine. Now, what is yourself? So medicine and sickness heal into each other. The whole world is medicine. Now, what is this self? So this is a lovely giant pond to jump into. And as I said before, you can enter at any point with these words. Medicine and sickness heal into each other. The whole world, the whole earth, the whole universe is medicine. Now, what is this self? Who'd like to respond to that if there's something stirring? It doesn't end. But there's a part, maybe just one thing I'll just say into that, which is, I don't want to sound like this is too much of a recipe, but as we, with consistent and dedicated and loving, heartfelt meditation, it's best if it can happen at least a little each day, and then with longer periods of really focused meditation, if you can find yourself on a retreat, either in person or online, however you can. But what meditation makes possible is a softening of this invented self, the curated self, the fabricated self, the illness of that. It starts to soften and can fall away, can fall entirely away. That's the great invitation of all the teachings, and we've got so many examples, in our literature, in our living tradition of how that happens. And when this fabricated self falls away, it actually heals itself back into not needing to push away even what looks like a fabricated self. That fabricated self is seen to be completely empty. We sometimes chant along with the Heart Sutra that form is emptiness. That's like the fabricated self falls away. Form is emptiness. And then we say, emptiness is form. Then each thing is just as it is. Kynan is Kynan. Anna is Anna. The Sydney Harbour Bridge behind you was the Sydney Harbour Bridge behind you. So, and that's okay. There's no tension there. There's no dualism there. But it's important to have a practice like meditation in order to be able to see form with the eyes of emptiness. And that's very much what, remember, the monk asks the teacher, Dongshan, now, is there one who is not sick? And Dongshan says there is. There is one who is not sick, a non-self, entirely empty. Well, what's it like? Does this non-self look after you? He says, no, this monk is properly looking after that one. This flesh and blood body is the one constantly attending, constantly being alive to, the one that has no name, shape or form, the formless. So all of that is in that mix too. That's another great koan, which we won't have time to explore here now, but it's in that mix as well. So yes, if I can, I'll send that to Aggie via email, and she can get it to you or to whoever's interested in the case. But keep exploring it. It keeps opening up in all directions. I know we're at time, so perhaps I'd better hand back to you, Aggie.